Us, because we are about to take a fascinating biological tour right inside our very own bodies. It's something you're doing right this exact second, probably without giving it even a passing thought, yet it is absolutely one of the most complex, vital processes keeping you alive. Today, we are going to unlock the secrets of the human respiratory system.
Just look at that number, 20,000. That is roughly how many times you're going to breathe today alone. Let that sink in. So, how does your body flawlessly execute 20,000 breaths a day without you ever having to manually intervene? It's completely involuntary, yet it's perfectly synchronized. The mechanics behind this silent, continuous rhythm are nothing short of spectacular. And today, we're going to break down exactly how this hidden machinery actually works. All right, here is our roadmap for today's journey. 1. The respiratory system overview. 2. The bronchial tree. 3. Inside the alveoli. 4. The mechanics of breathing. And finally, 5. Brain control and regulation.
Okay, let's jump right into part 1, the respiratory system overview.
Looking at the big picture here, the full continuous pathway starts right at the top in your nasal cavity. When you breathe in, air travels through here and down into the pharynx, which is basically just the back of your throat. From there, it slips past the larynx or voice box and drops directly into the trachea. That's that long rib tube you see right in the center. Finally, the air empties out into the main staging area, the lungs, which rests right on top of that dome-shaped muscle at the bottom called the diaphragm. It's really a beautifully simple top-to-bottom pipeline.
So, if you were to track the sequential path a single molecule of oxygen takes to enter your body, it's really a quick 4-step journey. 1. Nasal cavity. 2. Pharynx and larynx. 3. Down the trachea. And 4. Into the lungs. Keep this sequence in your head because this pipeline, it's really just the delivery truck. The real magic happens once the air actually reaches its destination.
Which brings us to section 2, the bronchial tree.
Take a look at the distinct bands on the trachea in the center. Those are cartilaginous rings, and they are absolutely vital. They literally hold your windpipe open so it doesn't just collapse on itself when you inhale. Also, look closely at the lungs themselves. We tend to think of them as perfectly symmetrical balloons, right? But they actually aren't. Notice how the right lung is visibly divided into 3 distinct lobes, the upper, middle, and lower, while the left lung only has 2. Why? To make room for your heart, of course. Pretty neat. Now, once that air passes through the trachea, it enters the bronchial tree. I want you to picture this exactly like an upside-down tree growing right inside your chest. Just like a real oak tree uses a branching network of limbs and twigs to distribute water to thousands of leaves, your lungs use an inverted, branching network of airways to distribute oxygen deep, deep into the tissue. So the main trunk, the trachea, splits into the left and right primary bronchi. But obviously it doesn't stop there. Those split into secondary bronchi, which divide into tertiary bronchi, and so on, getting narrower and narrower. This continuous division ensures that the air gets spread out as widely as possible, eventually ending at those tiny little clusters at the very bottom, known as the alveoli. And that leads us perfectly into part 3, inside the alveoli. At the very end of every tiny little twig of that bronchial tree, you'll find millions of microscopic air sacs. Picture millions of incredibly tiny clusters of grapes. Now, by having millions of small spheres rather than just one giant balloon, your lungs create a truly massive amount of surface area. And when it comes to the lungs, surface area is the name of the game. You need as much space as physically possible to perform the critical function of gas exchange.
These clusters of sacs are the ultimate gas exchange interface. Notice how tightly they are woven in with those delicate blood vessels. The blue vessels are branches of the pulmonary artery, and they're carrying carbon dioxide-rich blood from the body. Meanwhile, the red vessels are branches of the pulmonary vein, carrying the freshly oxygenated blood right back to your heart. This insanely tight wrapping ensures that oxygen can easily slip from the air sac straight into the blood, while carbon dioxide slips right out of the blood and into the sac to be exhaled.
Let's look even closer. Down at the cellular level, the incredibly thin wall of an alveolus is made primarily of flat, very thin cells called squamous epithelium. That extreme thinness allows gases to pass right on through. But look at the other cells in the mix. You've got macrophages, those red, uniquely shaped cells that basically act as a cleanup crew, roaming around hunting for dust and pathogens. And crucially, down at the bottom, those green cells are secreting a fluid called surfactant.
Without that surfactant, the surface tension would cause these tiny sacs to completely collapse every single time you exhale. It's really just a brilliant, self-sustaining microscopic ecosystem.
All right, let's zoom back out for section 4, the mechanics of breathing.
So, during inspiration, when you breathe in, two main things happen. The diaphragm forcefully contracts downward and the intercostal muscles between your ribs expand your chest cavity outward. That action physically draws air in. Then, during expiration, the exact opposite happens. The diaphragm simply relaxes and moves back up, while those ribcage muscles relax, compressing the lungs and physically pushing the stale air back out.
To really visualize this, think of your chest like a giant set of vintage fireplace bellows. It really all boils down to basic physics. During inspiration, your muscle movements increase the internal volume of your chest. When volume goes up, the internal pressure drops below the outside air pressure, creating a vacuum that naturally sucks air in. Conversely, during expiration, the volume decreases, which causes the internal pressure to rise, forcing the air back out. Your muscles are just constantly manipulating the volume of your chest to control air pressure.
Moving on to our final stop, Section 5, Brain Control and Regulation.
So, who is running this automated pump? Your nervous system runs this entirely on a constant, real-time feedback loop. While your cerebrum and cerebellum do play a role, the real respiratory control hubs are located right down in the brainstem, specifically in two areas called the pons and the medulla. These distinct regions are constantly crunching data and firing signals down the spinal cord and through specific nerves directly to the lungs and diaphragm to adjust your breathing completely on the fly. We can easily distill this neural autopilot down to three main takeaways. First, the medulla and pons act as the master control centers, constantly keeping tabs on the levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide in your blood. Second, the vagus nerve acts as your sensor, sending a continuous stream of feedback from the lungs back up to the brain. And third, the phrenic nerve acts as the commander, carrying the rhythmic, pulsing signal from the brain straight down to the diaphragm, telling it exactly when to contract and when to relax to keep you breathing.
And just like that, we've reached the end of our journey. Just pause for a second and literally take a deep breath with me. When you consider the millions of specialized cells working in perfect harmony, the flawless fluid physics acting like a bellows, and that automated neural autopilot firing from your brainstem every single second to keep the rhythm going, isn't every single breath a literal biological miracle? Next time you catch yourself inhaling, take a split second to appreciate the absolute marvel of engineering that is your respiratory system. Thanks so much.